Hi, welcome to Mend. I'm Julie. Today on Mend we have Sheila Newsom. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Julie.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's been, I guess I've known you now for just a couple of months.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've known you for years.
That's a special way of being in a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny, though. I felt that synchronicity as well. Things just fall into place, and it feels right. And then things begin to kind of just flow in that river, and I'm so thankful that we're both involved with toward the same goals.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. I would love for you, it's going into that, I'd love for you to share your story about your mental health journey as well, and then
Okay.
Towards the end what you're doing now. But I guess I always love to know how people were raised and just where you're from and just to know a little more about you.
Sure. I was born in West Texas to two lovely humans, and I had grandparents that lived a couple of blocks away on both sides, and it was a wonderful upbringing, and I was kind of the golden child growing up. I was educated by forward-thinking people. I had a lot of experiences in love and played sports and was everybody's everything in high school. And then I went to A&M for a year, and then I had my first calling. And remember my mother, I had grown up as an Aggie, and I was where thought I was supposed to be, but then I got a letter from my mother, and she goes, I just thought you might think about this. And it was an application to go to West Point. So it was something, heroic and adventurous. And so I took all of the things to get in and got in. So I went to West Point. But I was 17, 18-year-olds by that time. But I remember getting on that plane, Braniff, which doesn't exist anymore, and thinking as I was flying, this is part of a destiny. And so somehow I had this sense that I was coming home, and the first time I went through the gates at West Point, I felt home.
That's powerful. Up until that point, did you ever hear about mental health? Did you know about this world that we are hearing so much about now?
It was. I grew up, there are, I think, two state psychiatric hospitals. One was in Big Spring, the other one was in Vernon.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so my mother, who was a nurse, actually worked at the state hospital for a short time, but both parents were very involved with the state psychiatry hospital, Big Spring State Hospital. So I knew of mental health as an aspect of pathology. It was something that was wrong with people, and that the people that had those sorts of processes were somehow flawed, and they put them away. I also know that, I felt that way about alcoholism and about a lot of character defects that I now know are not in that realm. But that's the background. It was an interesting subject and something that it was cocktail talk in a certain way until I realized that I was an alcoholic and went to treatment when I was 42.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And up until that time, I thought that was something that other people had. Other people had this disease of alcoholism, but I thought it was just a character defect.
Now, did that start in West Point, or when did that start?
Well, and that's an interesting point. I think I was born with it.
Okay.
And so, what I know about alcoholism now, having been sober now for almost 29 years, is that, I think it's something that is born in us. I think it's biologic. I think it's genetic. I think it's cultural. But there are certain characteristics that, I know pretty well define what my behavior was, and that was once I started drinking, I couldn't tell you when I was going to stop. Now, I didn't always just go off in a blackout, but my own history is that I began to do things when I was drunk that I just couldn't account for, and I felt ashamed about.
When did you take that first drink? When did that start for you?
Actually, the first time I drank was when I was 12, and I stole alcohol from my parents. They were gone. We had a sitter spending the night, but the first time that I drank alone, and I drank to get drunk. And so it was the way that alcohol did something. It turned a key. Now, I never drank much in high school. I didn't drink in college. I very rarely drank a lot when I was stationed in Italy as a paratrooper. But when I was 35, someone offered me a drink when I was under a lot of duress from a physician's standpoint, and all of a sudden I felt this magical feeling like that is the way I should feel. And so that really was the point at which, when I look back, the lock and key were triggered. And I think that's, happens to a lot of us in that realm, if we're fortunate.
But up until that point, you had never felt the magic of it. I mean, you were at West Point. I can't imagine what being at West Point is even like, to be honest with you. I cannot even keep up with certain organization during the day, or it is on point.
Yeah.
So I'd love, just love to hear about a little bit of that, and to understand that. Do you think you were just in such a different mindset and focused on what you had to accomplish there, that anytime you had a drink, it didn't affect you the same way? Or
no, I think it was a learned behavior. Now, I will say to this, is that my senior year at West Point, I was second in command of the Corps. I was the captain of the baseball team. I made good grades, and I was going to graduate and go and be a paratrooper in the most elite unit in the Army. And one Saturday night, probably in February of my senior year, we rarely had weekends off, but I went to a hotel, and I was trying to do something. I remember write a paper, and I became so frustrated and so disheartened in a very short period of time that I went and bought several bottles of aspirin. Flash forward 25 years, and I remember taking care of a woman who had overdosed on aspirin and lost her kidney function. So I don't know that was a suicide gesture or if it was suicidal ideation, but I know I reached a point at which I felt so frustrated and lost that felt like the only thing I could respond to. That was well before my alcoholism really began to show itself. But I know what it felt like in that act of desperation, where it wasn't a matter of dying, it was a matter of just wanting to be out from under the pain that I was feeling. So I understood that from that point on.
Because at that point, you could see the next steps of your life and what you were going to move forward with career-wise, but there was something inside of you that wasn't aligning.
Yes. And I think that's a really good point, is that that alignment. I think that, when we're on that beam and we feel that we're a part of and doing the right thing, what I've learned psychologically is that, that's that persona, but there's also a mask behind that. There's also shadow that goes with that. And what I really didn't realize is that I've got to honor both of those. I've got to realize what's conscious and what's unconscious in order to fuel that soul that we all get born with. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that this is soul work. But, when I look back, I was so vested in the persona I love the woman that I married. I loved my children. I loved the work that I did. And there was still something else behind that. And it was, a lot of people would say, well, okay, when you finally determined that you were transgender, there are people that we know that would say, well, that's a pathology. You're crazy. And I've had people that are close to me that have said that and have turned away. But what I do know is that, one, the alcoholism was something that I had to take care of or I was going to die from.
Yeah, so that happened in your late 30s. So up until this point, like in West Point, you're still in your 20s.
Yes.
Then you go on to move to Italy, and then
Right.
you mind just kind of going through this?
Yeah, I mean, I
segments of
was
that?
living the life of a soldier. The war that I had actually gone to West Point to fight was signed. The accord was signed my senior year, and so there wasn't a war on. But I was in an elite unit attached to NATO, so I was flying around, jumping out of airplanes in Italy and England, Turkey, Germany, and living on a lake in northern Italy. And during that time, I learned to use exercise. I smoked for many years. There were ways to take the edge off when something would crawl up at night and start beginning to ask those questions. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? Why are you here? All of those things, and I would get depressed around those. I would medicate, and mm-hmm. so I learned to be very efficient with using all of those things, and that translated the same way into medical school.
So then after that, you went on to medical school?
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was just the next hardest thing. I had this altruistic belief, and I think that it was an attractor that, hey, it's a way to help people. So I knew at some level that there was something that I was being pulled toward. And I think that's the thing that I've come to realize only in retrospect, is that we each have a daimon, a guide, an angel that helps move us from point to point when we're not aware of what it is that we're doing. And I think that's exactly the story that I hope to tell, is that we may never know if something's right, but we know immediately at some level if it's wrong.
That's a great point.
And that comes from that soul that daimon works in and through. And I think that's exactly the stories that you're helping to tell. Is it, how did we get through the shadow with enough of a self-awareness that we could come back from the edge and say, listen, this is what I've seen. And for people to relate to that, you can't just talk your way into this. You've got to live your way into it and then come back. And I think that, most of everybody that you've interviewed, that I've seen, and that the work that I've done, I know it's that authenticity that resonates. It's nothing that you say, it's nothing that I say or have done. It's just, how authentic is that? Would you have thought that, separating from the love of your life, or divorce, or going to treatment would have been the thing that had cracked you open?
No. If anybody would have even asked me,
yes,
probably a year before I got divorced, or said, this is what's going to happen in your life over the next few years, I would have said, you are wrong. That's not going to happen to me. I'm in control. I've got this. I'm not going to start drinking too much because I can control my drinking. I can control everything, right?
Of course you can.
Until you can't.
Until you can't. And I love it. And we all then hit that bottom.
Do you think it was your ego at 35 that said, this alcohol feels really good. It's time to start.
Yeah, yes.
Really taking this
that's
on.
it.
Like your ego went to the, like you said, you believe that
Yes.
you were born with this, but your
Yes.
ego got to a place that was like, yeah, and we're going to really feed that.
And I think that's a perfect way of framing that. That ego was bloated enough with this persona of being West Pointer, doctor, community leader, and I thought that was enough. And that was all in the conscious realm. And something had to come in order to puncture the valence, the charge behind that bloated ego. Now, the way that it happened is that I was flying back on a private plane that should have been full, but there were only two of us back from the Super Bowl of 1993.
How old were you at this time?
That was the Cowboys and the Bills,
Okay.
and had been at the Rose Bowl. Michael Jackson had been at the halftime.
Okay.
So I'm flying back and thinking about, getting off the plane, going to get something to drink, blah, blah, blah. And this man, who I did not know, turned to me and said, "I want to help you get sober."
And you didn't know this man at all?
I did. I had met him over the weekend, and he had seen how I drank, so that would have been some key. But I mean, for him, out of the randomness of the universe, to turn to me and say, knowing that was the point in time that there was a bifurcation that was about to occur, that was God. So that's when I knew there's something else bigger than me.
I love that.
And I mean, I went home, Julie, and my wife said, and sat down with her, and I said, "I'm an alcoholic, I need to go to treatment." And she said, "Well, I was planning on leaving next week."
Oh, leaving you?
Leaving me. So if all of that would have happened, then my life would have turned out to be a lot shorter and a lot different. So, I think that's the other thing, is the arc of our lives is dotted with these things that we call mental health conditions, and yet they've been entree waves into deeper compassion. I don't think that you could have gone through the things that you've gone through in the last couple of years without developing more compassion once your heart gets opened. And that's the question, is what does it take to open our hearts in ways that were most effective and efficient with other humans?
Yeah, great point.
So I think that we're both pointing toward, again, that question from a mental health perspective. How do we keep and have people have hope in their lives?
That's a great question, because I can look back over those years, over the course of my life, because
Yes.
this mental health is not something that happened after my divorce. It was something I've dealt with since I was little. I mean, I can remember in
Yes.
kindergarten.
Yep.
And I think I always had hope, like that's what kept me moving forward, that or music.
And, I think that wandering around in those dark woods, I think the thing that galvanizes all of this is that makes it all worthwhile, is that sense of joy. And, the other thing is that for you to see that in your children and to feel that empathy, that's the thing that bothers me most these days, is that it seems that we have created these narratives around whole segments of population that, we dismiss those from a generalization. We generalize and say these people are less than because. And so I want to say that, having gone through this transgender transition late in life, I didn't start till I was I didn't acknowledge it till I was after 60. That I will say that I have great empathy for those young men and women who I've actually helped take care of at a Kind Clinic, local clinic here with the transgender population. But they were tenacious from an early point of, no, this is who I am. But to have those people discounted because of the way they look, what they thought, is the same thing that we've done historically, about race, creed, religion. We've tried to segregate to make I've tried to segregate to make myself more comfortable. I'm better than or different than. And as it turns out, I'm not. I mean, I'm just not different or better at any point. And I think that is important, especially in regards to my mental health issues, is to be open and honest about, what they felt like, how they came through, and what I did about that. And I think that's why the ketamine work that we're doing now can certainly be helpful, I think, in that desperate space of suicidality and some of the major depressions that just won't respond to most anything.
I know you said at 60s when you decided to start transitioning, but did you feel anything differently there as you started to take alcohol out of your system?
I did.
I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And but I mean, I think it's the same thing. You plug in trauma, plug in anything dark, anything from those deep shadows. And the thing that I can say about my own experience is that there was a miracle, and most people that are that have been recovering won't pinpoint this, but I can tell you that my sobriety is a miracle in that the compulsion to drink was taken away.
I totally agree with you.
So then, if that's a force there that happened, if that was something that intervened, that happened at a certain date, 1st of February of 1993, it did. But how those people at the treatment center helped teach me how to keep that ego right-sized and to begin to live was a perfect no. But what the thing was is that they taught me how to be honest with the integrity of my own soul. And I think that's what we all look for, is that ability to live from a platform where we can discern what really gives us joy, what we know's right. I think that's inherently built in us in a certain way. Yeah. Now, I think that there are those of us that are unfortunately born with mental conditions that prevent that. Schizophrenia runs deeply in my family. I had a cousin who at 42 died. He was actively schizophrenic. Dementia runs in my family, and so those are chronic diseases that we can't account for, but they're physical abnormalities. I think that there are mental health conditions that are larger than just the brain. The brain's part of it, but it's also part of a psyche. And psyche is the biosphere that that quantum mechanics tells us that we're all related in certain ways energetically. So I think it's much larger than just the brain, but the brain's where it starts. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the help and work that's been done with Alzheimer's, with dementia, has looked at the way that those neurons create those infinity of pathways, which is just remarkable. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about something larger than this. It's the psyche, that's the conscious and the unconscious, and the way that we interface with the world. That is a reality as well. And I think that's the thing that, I'd suggest to you, Julie, that we're talking about, how do we influence that aura How do we influence this vessel that we approach everybody with? There are people that you know that you bump into and you feel really inspired just by the fact that you're around them. That's a reality. And so I'll say this is that I think we're both speaking to how do we get people to the point where they can access that within themselves and be authentic, and that's what people feel. I had somebody, a mentor, once tell me that, and I think this is a very wise thing, is that people won't remember anything about what you tell them. They'll remember exactly the way that you made them feel. And so I think that speaks to what we're talking about in this mental health realm, is how do you help people access from inside the best of what they can be?